Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order for the day. First item on our agenda is approval of today's agenda.
Move approval.
Second. Motion second to approve the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Citizens to be heard. Any citizens that would like to be heard on items that are not on today's agenda,
Right here.
please step up to the podium.
Yes, sir. I didn't know which hat to wear, so I brought them both. I'm here today to get Sheriff Empting and County Attorney or State's Attorney Milton temporarily removed from their positions. They are willfully, knowingly, and intentionally refusing to do their job. Their job being fight organized crime of the theft of my mother's estate. They're doing this so by conversion, and I've reported to the sheriff's office many times. Affidavit form, a sworn statement, that's an affidavit, and Mr. Empting refuses to pass that on to Milton's staff, as I know Milton's been out of the country, but that doesn't take his responsibilities away. He's still responsible for the duties of his people. And the people in the Attorney General's, or the County Attorney's office refuse to do their job because they know of it. They admitted that they know of it, that's going on, but they refuse to do it. Now it appears that we have at least two law firms involved in this conversion. One being Vogel Law Firm, who's hooked up with the abstract office over in Fargo. I forget the abstract office name, but it has 3 letters anyway.
Before you go on, why don't you state your name for the record so they've got...
Dwayne Hanson. Address 21255 50th Avenue, South Holly, building a new spot. And phone number 218-329-3880. No, the case number that I'm referring to is 14 PR 18-1386. I do believe is right. And the personal representative is in violation of, for sure, of Minnesota Statute 524.3-703, general duties. That's general duties of a PR in an estate. And he refuses to follow the will. He's intentionally converted land that's was worth probably $3,900 down to less than $3,000, and then put it in his name, which is a conflict of interest because he's both personal representative and one of the heirs. That's illegal also. I mean, this has gone on for 5.5 years. My mother died in 2014, January 5th. And come July 5th, that's 5.5 years I've had to put up with this crap because your staff, here the sheriff and the county attorney, refuse to do their damn job. I want their badges and I want their licenses and I want them out. They shouldn't even be in charge of themselves.
Okay, so that's what you want. You've already been to court on this item, have you not? And what was
It hasn't been completed yet, no. We haven't been to court on it. The judge has made an order to follow the will.
Steve, don't you have information that this has been adjudicated?
It has not been adjudicated. I object to your insinuating that it's been adjudicated. Whose side are you on? Are you on the people's side or are you on the goddamn attorney's side?
So, this has gone to court, it's been adjudicated.
Well, I intend to put a claim against the county for
if you-
several $1 million because you people refuse to do your job.
This is fine.
You
But-
guys should all be out, each one of you, District 1, District 2, District 3, District 4, District 5, you should all be out.
Okay.
You are a former police officer, are you not? You're protecting the police, is that what you're doing?
Look, we've listened to your complaint.
No, you have not listened, you have not listened one little bit, because I got a lot more to say.
We're not gonna remove the sheriff nor the county attorney.
Well, it's your job as a
No, it's
forum
not
to do
my
that.
job, So, I'm gonna, why, we're done listening to you.
Okay, that's great, I said my piece, and you guys know where I'm at, now I'm going to make my claim.
There you
Did
go.
you find the claim form yet? Are you privately insured or what?
We can, you and I can talk after board.
No, we're not gonna talk, I'm filing a claim. Thank you. By the way, the hat says, "Make our farmers great again," just for your information.
Any other citizens that would like to be heard on any item that's not on the agenda today? Hearing none. We've got approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
So move.
We have a motion to pay the bills. Any further discussion? And a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of minutes from the June 11th, 2019 meeting.
Move approval.
Got a motion to approve?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from the June 18th board meeting.
Move approval.
Have a motion to approve?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, first item is request approval of financial letter of support for the Moorhead Grade Separation Safety and Mobility Project. Good morning.
Morning.
You guys don't want anybody removed from office?
I could probably think of a few. How about you starting this?
I can, certainly. And thanks for having me today to hear our request. We're proceeding with another application for federal funding for the 11th Street underpass. We've done this before and you've supported us before. I think this might be our fourth application for federal funding for that project. On the most recent one, which was about a year ago, obviously did not receive funding, but did have the opportunity for a debrief with US DOT officials and actually got some very good feedback. That application advanced pretty far in their review process. The challenge ultimately was benefit cost ratio. So given that positive feedback, the city council decided that we should pursue it one more time, try to beef up our benefit cost ratio, and essentially resubmit the same project. Last year and in previous applications, the county was gracious enough to be a partner in that application. I think the ability to show a number of partners as we have, the county, MnDOT, the railroad is real positive for the application. And so we're here to solicit your support once again. We've provided a draft letter of support to that effect, which certainly you can modify as you see fit. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Zimmerman?
Yeah, I think this is about 20 years overdue. You know, no offense to anybody, but it's an expensive project, but it's very much needed. I would move that we sign the letter of support.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a, Jenny, go ahead.
I think the item of note, though, is there is a cost share in this piece, and I think that's what changes from the letters that we've signed in the past, so just, right,
Didn't we have a cost share before?
The last letter also had a.
But was it to that amount? Okay, I apologize. But I also want to, just to clarify, the city and the county are in the process of different plans for other projects together, and you know, we really worked hard on that transfer station piece, and I don't want it to appear that because we're signing this letter of support that that's changing the priorities of that project, because significant work and dollars have been allocated for that project as well. And I support this as chair of the MetroCog board. We signed this on Thursday, so I fully support this, and it's a needed piece for the region, but I also wanted to comment on that.
And to that point, obviously, this is an application for federal funding, and the only state funding here would be MnDOT funding, should this be received. The city has also submitted an application or a request for state bonding funding, but the city council has been very clear in its direction that the transfer station is its #1 priority in terms of lobbying efforts at the state legislature. So we're going through all the processes to try to line up whatever funding we can, but the priorities are clear.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Good luck.
Next item, presentation and request for approval of agreement between Clay County and Moore to create an entity to acquire property in Minnesota. Mr. Shockley.
I think Eric should go.
Eric, come on up. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Well, we'll have a less dramatic presentation. So. This is pretty boring.
Speak for yourself.
I was going to say, just wait.
Thank you. What we have before the county commission is a joint powers agreement between the city of Moorhead and Clay County to create a joint powers entity to acquire property for the Fargo-Moorhead diversion project in Clay County and in parts of Moorhead. Put together a draft presentation. I'll just go over the high level. Feel free to ask any questions. Eric Dodge is here from AE2S. He's actually the person that's in charge of the nuts and bolts of land acquisition. So if there's any questions about acquisition or how the process works, Eric can respond. Minnesota has a few nuances, so if we need to get into specific details, we can. Kind of other quick update, the Moorhead City Council approved the agreement last night. So the purpose of the agreement is to create, this is created by discussions by the 2 members of Clay County Commission that are on the Diversion Authority and the 3 members that are from the Moorhead City Council on the Diversion Authority. They create this entity to acquire property. It's authorized by Minnesota statute, which allows for the creation of joint powers entities. It was also contemplated in the joint powers agreement that created the diversion authority. The reason that we wanted to have an entity, a joint entity that would acquire property, was to make sure that Minnesota representatives were overseeing the property acquisition for properties in Minnesota. It is a sub-joint powers agreement. Its only purpose is land acquisition, and that's voluntary land acquisition. It was contemplated as part of the permitting process for the Minnesota DNR that we would create this entity throughout the permit process that was envisioned. And then the entity itself is composed of the 5 members of the Diversion Authority Board that are Minnesota members. So you have 3 members from Moorhead, 2 members from Clay County, and 1 member appointed by Buffalo Red Watershed District. The board members could be removed only at the discretion of the appointing body. So if Clay County wanted to switch out the members, it certainly could, but they would also be switched out on the Diversion Authority. The officer positions are pretty straightforward. There's a chair. The chair's responsibility is to preside at meetings. They're a voting member. They don't have veto authority, just like the county commission. The chair votes but can't veto something that the chair has already voted on. The chair has to be a member of either the Moorhead City Council or the Clay County Commission. They have a one-year term, but they can be elected for multiple terms without, there's no term limitations. Vice chair, very similar. In the absence of the chair, the vice chair resides. Their one-year term, no limit on the number of terms, and there's a secretary position. Throughout the negotiations, the discussion was had where the meeting's going to occur. It was decided the meetings would occur here at the Clay County Courthouse, and Clay County would serve as the fiscal agent. The funding for the project comes from the Diversion Authority and funds from the state of Minnesota, so Clay County will handle those funds, and then anytime cost for land is incurred, would remit an invoice back to the Diversion Authority, very similar to how the Cass County Joint Water Resource District handles land acquisitions in Minnesota. On about the fourth page of the presentation, I briefly went through the powers of the joint entity. And just briefly, they can acquire property, enter into contracts, because there'll be contracts that are necessary for appraisers or attorneys or land negotiators, etc., perhaps surveyors. Acquire property, incur expenses. If you wanted to hire staff or consultants through this entity, we certainly could. Has the ability to sell property. Sometimes we've seen on the North Dakota side, a landowner will say, I want you to buy my entire quarter rather than 45.6 acres. I just want an entire buyout, and then they're selling off the remnant properties either to adjoining property owners or as a trade. So giving the entity flexibility in how it handles land acquisition. Sue and be sued. There's times when there may be a lawsuit involved, and that entity would be the appropriate party to take that on. Arrange for public information meetings, establish a budget, secure insurance, and delegate tasks. Probably the most important item for both the city and Clay County is that entity will indemnify both Clay County and Moorhead for these land acquisition purchases. So essentially the entity becomes the responsible party for that, and also the authority to enter into cost share agreements with the state of Minnesota. I just went over on the next slide a brief recitation of the board's authority that you would, there's certain actions that need at least one affirmative vote from a Moorhead board member and one affirmative vote from Clay County, sort of these supermajority requirements, and those would be engagement of a negotiation team or appraiser, termination of negotiation or appraiser, setting the procedures and protocols and standard operating procedures for land acquisition, recognizing that when you're going back and forth with property owners and the negotiation process, that's a really important item for the board. A finding of unsuccessful negotiation. In the event that we're not able to make a voluntary purchase, if it's outside of the city, then it comes back to the Clay County Commission for further action. And if it's inside the city, then it would go to the Moorhead City Council for further action. And that would be entirely up to either the City Council or the County Commission. If they wanted to try another round of offers or just move on to the eminent domain process. And that's leaving that authority with the board rather than with this entity. Approvals of purchase agreements and negotiations. And then I just briefly, on the second to last page, went over the land acquisition process, and Eric's here, he can certainly answer any questions in depth. But in general, how it works is the Diversion Authority comes up with a package, a land acquisition directive, and a budget for property to acquire. It would give that to this entity. That is accompanied by budgeted funds for the acquisition. In Minnesota, the land rights would include the southern embankment and flowage easements. The control structure is actually on the North Dakota side, so there's a significant amount of property, but in the overall scheme of the project, it's very small amount of property in Minnesota. Then the board would assign a negotiation team and an appraiser to a particular parcel. The appraiser would start to develop a report. The negotiation team lead would start those contacts with the property owner to make sure that they knew that the appraisal was being conducted. In Minnesota, the property owner is entitled to reimbursement for an appraisal themselves. So if it's a residential property, they get reimbursed up to $1,500 for their own appraisal. I believe if it's commercial or farmland, it's up to about $5,000. And so there's all that information and communications would be given to the landowner. And then the appraisal would be completed. It would be provided to the property owner along with draft terms, and the negotiator would try to reach a voluntary purchase with the landowner. If it's a voluntary purchase, that would come back to the joint board, and the joint board would give a thumbs up, or if, they want additional terms, maybe negotiate out those. Like sometimes it could be additional gravel, might be additional purchase of a property, might be remove some trees, and giving sort of that flexibility that we see with a lot of purchases of property. And then if it's successful, they would sign the purchase agreement and close on the property, and the property would be held by that joint entity. If it's unsuccessful, then it would come back to either the Clay County Commission or the City of Moorhead, depending upon where the property is located. Once again, there's not a contribution from Clay County itself into the entity. The entity's funds come either from the state legislature through the cost share agreement or from the diversion authority. So I can certainly answer any questions. I try to be respectful of time and go over it fairly quickly. And
Eric, anything you want to add?
No, I guess happy to answer any questions. Do you have any
Questions?
Yeah, I comment. I've certainly, over the time, I've seen how this process has worked with the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. This is set up to be very similar to the way it's working on the North Dakota side. And I think it's had quite a bit of success. And Eric, I'm going to ask you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me we've had about 200 property acquisitions on the Cass County side to date. Of those 200, I think 5 of them ended up in dispute, of which 4 of those 5 were resolved short of court. So we're looking at 1 out of 200 that actually went or is in the process of the going through the court process. So that says, those numbers say a lot. That our land acquisition teams are working very hard with the property owners to make sure they're treated fairly. And I think it's very important that we all are aware of that. So
Yeah, the only thing I would maybe add to that is we've, over the last several months, as we've resumed the acquisition program, we've probably added another couple dozen parcels that have been successfully closed. And we've been working hard on appraisals on the North Dakota side, as well as some voluntary appraisals where property owners ask if they can get the process started early. And so those appraisals, as John noted in the process, appraisals turn into an offer, and then now there's a fleet of negotiators out there trying to work up a mutually agreeable deal. So it's a good process, and we're making good headway. So.
Jenny?
Well, I think it's important to note the discussion on this is really about making sure that Minnesota landowners are represented by the elected officials in Minnesota. And I think that, foremost, that's the most important piece. And this agreement is not about channels or plans or permits. It really comes down to making sure that the groundwork is in place to treat people fairly during this process. And because of that, because I'm adamant about having Minnesota representatives making those decisions, that's the reason I can support this today. And I appreciate there's a significant amount of groundwork that's gone into play in terms of discussion to mold this for what it was or is, and I think it hopefully will serve as a useful tool for us going forward.
Any other questions for Jenny?
So, point of clarification for Mr. Shockley. Are we looking then, would the motion be to adopt attachment B?
correct, it would be we'd be looking for a motion to authorize the chair and administrator to execute the joint powers agreement. We, pursuant to the overall joint powers agreement that created a diversion authority, we need the consent of the diversion authority board. I don't foresee any issues with that. That's on their agenda for Thursday.
Right. Mr. Chair, oh, did you?
Yeah, I did have one other question in looking at this. It appears as though there's an annual meeting in January. I think is that correct? You'll have a meeting scheduled. That annual meeting, is that something that all member entity or members of the county commissions and or city councils will be involved in, or will that just be the
It would,
joint powers group?
it would just be the joint powers group, but it is an open meeting, so anybody kind of, I mean, if the whole county commission wanted to attend, it's open, so.
In this particular case, it's, the way it's being proposed, it would take effect July 1st of this year, of which then in July there would be an organizational meeting that would establish who's the chair and all of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the processes can start. Mr. Chair, I would move that we enter into the joint powers agreement, the Minnesota Land Acquisition Joint Powers Agreement.
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want to clarify my question because I'm still a little confused. So what is the purpose of the January meeting?
It's every, in the entities that we've created, we try to have an annual meeting just to elect a chair and a vice chair, and it's sort of a housekeeping meeting. More likely than not, there'll be plenty of business on the agenda, but we just want to make sure that every year we're doing the housekeeping of selecting the chair.
So
and
you'll
vice
have
chair.
one in July and then again in January? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why it's in January, of course, is in years where we do have elections, for example, for the county board, new officers take their positions in the first part of January. So that would make sense then, it goes with Mr. Shockley said, it's a organizational thing more than anything.
I thought it was something like the intergovernmental retreat, and that's what my question was.
And that same reason applies for the Moorhead council members too, because they take office in January also.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Eric, John, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Next item, request approval of resolution 2019-25 to participate in performance measurement program. Darren?
Yes.
Good morning.
All right, good morning. Thanks for having me. As you probably recall, last year about this time, the board signed a resolution to participate in the state's performance measurement program. And through 2018, we gathered some information and had a survey out there. And at the end of the year, in December of 2018, the state provided Clay County with $8,930 for participating in this program. We've been participating in it for probably about the last 5 years or so, I would say. And so the resolution today is to continue to participate in the performance measurement program for 2019, which the report will then be for submitted July 1st of 2020. But the 2018 report is just about completed. I'll submit that to the state on Friday for the 2019 or 2018 data. So I've gathered all the data from all the departments already and am ready to submit that report. So this resolution is just basically saying, do you want to continue the program for next year as well?
Okay, questions for Darren?
The results will also be put on the website so that the citizens can see that. And there's multiple different areas of, from public safety, public works, social services, veteran services, whole list of data that I got on the report. So it'll be.
So
presented to
Derek,
the.
this doesn't cost us anything.
No, no, it doesn't cost us anything. We get 14 cents per capita back from the state, and that's where the $8,930
Well, if we're making a motion on something that doesn't cost us anything and gives us
I mean, how many times does
8,930,
that
I'm gonna
happen?
make that motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Well, my only discussion on that is I certainly like $8,930 free dollars to us too. It's not free $8,930. Somebody's paying the tax on it. But the thing that's important to me is there actually dialogue that's going on in this thing? Or are we just collecting $8,930 tax dollars from the state because we can? I'm hopeful that there's enough citizen involvement that showing that it's making sense to do.
Mhm. Well, when this first started, it was kind of difficult to put all these reports together and figure out what reports were meaningful and what weren't, and now, after everything is kind of templated out, it's very easy to pull this information. Technically, a lot of this information is online somewhere. It's just a matter of pulling it. And now the departments can get me this information because they pretty much track it already. I ask for the information, and probably within 24, 48 hours, I have all the information from all the departments. So it's a lot easier report to put together now than when it first started, because we were trying to determine what data was important, what wasn't, or what was overkill and what wasn't. So now, whether it's useful to the citizens and stuff, and whether there's a dialogue or not, I guess that would be up to the citizens to determine if they want more information or how we're proceeding with some of the areas that are showing some deficiencies here and there. So,
All right, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Darren. Sheriff, renewal of memorandum of understanding for school resource officer for Ulen Hitterdal School District. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Thanks for having me this morning. Here today to hopefully get a MOU signed with the Ulen Hitterdal School District and the Clay County Sheriff's Office to provide a school resource deputy to the school district. For the past, I would say 5 to 6 years, we've been in cooperation with Holly School District, Ulen Hitterdal, and the Sheriff's Office, to where we had a deputy split their time between Ulen Hitterdal and Holly School District. Holly School District has decided to go with the Holly Police Department for the upcoming year for their SRO. Therefore, we had to do a new MOU with Ulen Hitterdal School District. And what we did is the cost sharing side of that is Holly used to pay 33% of the SRO. Well, we picked up about half of that, and Ulen picked up half of that in order to make this work.
So it's 50/50.
It's a 50-50 now. Our school resource deputy for the Ulen Hitterdal area is Deputy Nicole Reno. She does a fantastic job up there. She's a very, very good resource for us up in that area. If we have any calls or anything like that, we can always reach out to her for information. It's a great program that we have up there, and Deputy Reno is fantastic at it. She may have a little bit extra time and be a little flexible during this because Ulen only wants half time. Therefore, we'd be able to use her with other projects that we'd have within the Sheriff's Office and also on patrol if needed. And she's also our Assistant Emergency Manager. So we do have things that will keep her busy when she's not in the school district either, or as well.
Good. It is a great program.
It is.
And we did discuss this at the PIC meeting, and I think you have a good plan, so. What are the board's wishes?
I move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Oh,
Thank you.
Oh, he's back.
Oh, you're back.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, resolution.
Here's your your copy there, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Want to hand that to him?
Thank you.
That's for 14.5 million.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Good
next,
for 10 days, and after that it goes higher.
resolution 2019-27, 2020, request for proposals for public health care services to families and children. Good morning.
Good morning. It's a long agenda title. Okay, Larry Young and I are here today we're seeking a resolution per the Department of Human Services requirement for our health plan. So maybe just to give a little bit of background, if you come in and apply for a Minnesota health care program through our agency or online through MNsure, if you're determined eligible, you are put on a health plan. And the state of Minnesota, every several years, the last one that they did was 4 years ago, does a request for proposal process to health plans to serve the Minnesota healthcare recipient their health needs. So if you're approved, you'd be put on what's called a managed care plan or a PMAP plan, that whatever plan is available in your county. So currently for Clay County, we have Blue Plus and Health Partners. So if you're determined eligible, unless you have some other exclusion, you are put on one of those health plans and you can make a choice. So currently the state of Minnesota has done a request for proposal process for the 80 Minnesota greater counties. And the counties have a role in that. So the process that we are engaged in is once the health plans make a proposal, they get sent to the counties and we have to evaluate a section of their proposal, give them a review rating. We also look at their provider network in our county, and then we're to make a recommendation. A recommendation to you as the county board, who in turn would then do a resolution which would go to DHS in the process. DHS considers all of this information, but 4 years ago when we went through this process, we were recommending different health plans than what they actually approved for our county. So it was kind of a frustrating process, quite honestly. 4 years ago, we had Blue Plus, Medica, and UCare. And we were recommending to keep those 3 health plans, and they gave us Blue Plus and Health Partners. Health Partners over the last 4 years has really proved to be a health plan that's not beneficial to our citizens, primarily because they do not have a contract with Sanford primary care physicians. So we have over 10,000 of our recipients choosing Blue Plus and about less than 400 choosing Health Partners for that one reason, along with other factors. But so our citizens really don't have a choice. So in this process, we rated the health plans. There were 4 health plans that responded to serve our county: Blue Plus, Health Partners, UCare, and Medica. Based on that review rating, there were several of us that got together to do that review rating, including public health. We were first and foremost recommending Blue Plus to remain in our county. Secondly, we're recommending Medica, with UCare scoring 3rd and Health Partners 4th. So our resolution to you today is for our county to support 2 health plans, which would be Blue Plus and Medica. And then I did include in the resolution that UCare was our 3rd rated health program. This map, I can just pass this around, but again, this is a RFP process for folks that are on Minnesota Care, as well as families and children receiving Medicaid health plans. So most of our 4-county region, Clay, Becker, Ottertail, and Wilkin, all 4 of us currently have Blue Plus and Health Partners. And in conversation with those counties, it sounds like they're in similar position as we are. 4 years ago, Clay, Ottertail, and Becker actually appealed the state's decision to remove Medica from our area and replace it with Health Partners. We went down to DHS and gave our reasoning, and it didn't change the result of that process, so we're hopeful that this year they will take the feedback of the counties in terms of what would be best for our citizens. So that is why we're here today. I have submitted the ratings that we provided to DHS, but we're now looking for board approval of our recommendations and submission of the resolution to DHS.
Thank you. Questions for these fine people?
I appreciate that there's an effort by several people to go through this review process. I think that's a good thing. I guess I'm one that always believes that when possible, we should have a commissioner also sit on those reviews.
Sure.
I see there's an absence of that here.
Yes,
You know, I think when ultimately we're making recommendation to make changes on things, I'm not so sure that there would be any different finding.
Sure.
But I just think that when it comes to that type of thing, I know we have people that are involved with health boards and stuff like that, so
Sure.
members of our board, so I would just encourage that to, in the future, to maybe include somebody from the elected side.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. This is, ultimately an important decision the county makes for our citizens for
Yes, it is.
healthcare. So I think that's a very valid suggestion, and we'll definitely look to do that the next time around. I also will say that although the representatives reviewing these plans were social services and public health, we are often, the number of committees that we sit on, like the local advisory councils, the collaboratives, we are constantly getting feedback from our contractor providers as well as, other service providers, particularly in mental health and substance use, that plays a role in this process. So we are looking beyond what they have written on paper based on what we know has worked in our county and what we hear from our citizens and what's covered and what's not covered. So we certainly look at a broader scope of information.
Don't get me wrong, Rhonda, I think, your selection process, I don't dispute that whatsoever. It's, again, you said it yourself, this is an extremely important decision that the county makes. And to, from the public's perspective, to have something that important done without some aspect of the public's representation in this process, I just, we're the ones who can be scrutinized, for not being there.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm just trying to avoid that. So.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any of the board's wishes?
I would make a resolution, or make a motion to validate this.
I would second the
We have a motion.
recommendation.
We have a motion and a second on the resolution. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Ron.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Could I be
Mary.
able to have you sign this
Sure.
today, and then I'll
Yeah,
take it
bring
back?
it over.
Great. If I could just make one comment and follow up to a previous board meeting we had. We came before the board, it's been a couple weeks already, asking for a change in our emergency assistance plan to add childcare deposits as a eligible approval in that plan. And Commissioner Campbell, you had asked the question about getting back those deposits in situations. So we did do some checking, and actually in that child care plan, those folks are getting child care assistance as well. So what happens is when a deposit, if a deposit is made, the last 2 weeks of the child care is held back, and that deposit is used to cover that.
I see, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so those dollars are in essence returned.
Right,
Okay,
right.
that's,
Yeah, so we make communication in the system. So
but you did mention that there was one other area that you thought should be looked at too. Have you?
Yep.
We talked about deposits for our apartments.
Yes,
As well.
yes,
And,
yeah.
and I believe years ago, there was a mandate done by the state that we didn't have to monitor deposits, and so that's when we started doing our own county policy, is what we did. I've checked with other counties around in our area, and there's no formal way that they look to keep deposits or get deposits back. I think we're going to consider putting that into our policy so that we'll communicate with our landlords that if there is a deposit paid, then we would look to it to see if it would be sent back to us first.
Well, couldn't you do the same thing as just apply it to the balance as you do in the daycare?
I think what might simplify the whole process is if I come in and ask for emergency assistance, generally I'm asking for a deposit and I'm asking for first month's rent because I don't have either one of them. My protocol would be to pay the first month's rent and have the family pay for the deposits moving forward so that, A, we're not paying deposits any longer. But then it would be a communication that we'd have to have with the landlords then. So all the landlords, if I pay ABC landlord $500, then it's for them to
Rent.
yeah, and they collect the money. We're not paying rent with the child care system. We're at least paying child care out of the child care program.
Yeah, so it's a little different.
And for
I-
renting an apartment, I'm paying the rent and then I leave.
You know, in the rental business, and the reason I bring that up is in the rental business, a deposit is something there to assure that when they leave, things are in order. And if not, they can tap into that to remedy the situation. And I don't see any reason why if there were county dollars being used for deposits, that there should be any difference as to where they came from, that if everything is in order, that deposit should be returned.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah, and just to clarify, these are state and federal funds that are used for this program, but that's really neither here nor there. If it's a deposit and it's eligible to be returned, if we paid for it, we should collect it back. So I think what we're going to do is a couple things. As Larry indicated, we're going to focus a bit more on just that first month's rent for those applicants and working with them on coming up with the deposit themselves or some other means. But when there's a situation where we need to pay the deposit to eliminate a crisis, we'll need to look toward a protocol on how we track that. You know, some of those could be years down the road that we paid a deposit. So we'll have to, because those deposits are vendor paid directly to the landlord. So we will look at a process on how we might do that and include that in our EA plan. We're having communications with other counties as well that maybe have something similar that we can implement and get some best practice standards on that. There isn't any statute that precludes us from doing it. So,
Well, I
it's certainly
appreciate
something to look
the
at.
research.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item, request approval to appoint new planning commissioner. Good morning, Matt. It says Matt is
All right, we have an opening in the Planning Commission. Dan Langseth's term expired June 2019, so I come with a request to appoint a new member in his place. On the June 19th meeting, the Planning Commission reviewed 5 applicants and unanimously approved the recommendation of an Elkton Township resident, Laura Johnson. She also happens to be the Elkton Township clerk. And so we're here today for your approval.
Thank you. question?
recall, Laura had applied for the Board of Adjustment opening 6 months ago, and so Laura is a very active Clay County resident, and I think geographically lives close to Mr. Langseth, and the other applicants, I think part of the reason we thought that Laura would be a good fit is that there will be a couple of openings coming up soon, and those applicants were close to where the other planning commissioners currently live too. So in order to keep it geographically spread out, I think this is a good choice as well. I'll make a motion to approve the request.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Presentation on Cass Clay Community Land Trust, Tim Beaton, Executive Director. Good morning.
Morning. I'll start by telling you that I'm not here to ask for anything today. You notice that I concluded by saying today. Is it on here?
Not, couldn't get it on there.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
then
they all have it.
they have a copy. Very good. Executive Director of the Fargo Moorhead Area Foundation. We're a community foundation, been in existence about 50, closing on 60 years, providing services in the community. In the year 2015, if you start with in 2015, we participated along with the Economic Development Authority, the Chamber of Commerce, the United Way, and the Convention and Visitors Bureau in sponsoring a comprehensive workforce study. At that time, it showed that there were 6,700 jobs that were going begging. That number has increased, we understand. At that time, it was determined that 45% of those paid less than $13 an hour. It was estimated at that time that by the time 2020 came, with regard to replacements, deaths, moves, and so forth, that there would actually be 30,000 replacements that had taken place on that. The study talked about what things they said with regard to those individuals making $13 an hour or less, that it was highly unlikely you could attract them into your community, but at the very least what you could do is remove the barriers that would prevent them from coming to here or would discourage them. And they identified 3 things, and that was affordable housing, childcare, and transportation. The Ephraim Area Foundation chose to work on the workforce housing priority. We said we didn't think we had the wherewithal to attack homelessness. That's an entirely different problem, so we identified the area between $15 and $30 an hour in terms of people, those folks who are kind of caught in a gap of anything over $30 an hour, the market will take care of. Under $15 an hour, there may be some other programs to work with them. We said that we were going to try and figure out a method to provide a continuously sustainable stock of affordable housing in our community, something that we've gotten away from. Essentia has assisted us by doing a workforce study, or excuse me, a housing study in both Cass and Clay County. That's our footprint, by the way. And they determined that the median income was between $50,000 and $56,000. The average household cost was between $195 and $270, and it takes $2.10 an hour to afford the average home. As a side comment on that, one of the things that came out of the study was that using the federal guidelines of 30% of your income, if you spend more than that, you're considered to be cost burden for your homes. If you apply that against the 2 counties on that, some 57% of the homes or people who living in Cass and Clay County are cost burden. They're actually paying more than 30% for their housing costs. And it's a function of the fact that housing is, the builders we've talked to said they can't build them fast enough, and at $350,000 they sell them just as fast as they can because of the growth that's going on within our community. We made a decision to get involved. We looked at a number of different alternatives. The one we came to the conclusion would work best here would be the creation of a community land trust. Our board set aside $100,000 to fund this project, and we created an incorporation on August 16th of 2018. We at that point in time engaged Burlington Associates out of Burlington, Vermont, in the person of Michael Brown, to help us put this package together. We've spent very little money to put this together, but we've learned an awful lot. Steve can identify that we've had a number of conversations, and he's participated in some meetings with us. Essentially, as I said, did the study for us for free. Burlington Associates has charged us $16,000 for the first phase and could charge us $24 to $34 on our way up in terms of it going there. So the big thing is, what is a land trust? A community land trust, I should say. A land trust you may be familiar with, but a community land trust is a little bit something different. In a normal situation, when a government entity provides a subsidy for someone to buy a home, they give them a check and they use that for making the purchase. At the time that house is then subsequently sold, the people who have been occupying it take that subsidy with them and move out because they get the market value on that home. And two things happen. Number one, the county or city or whoever has to provide another subsidy. And then secondarily, there is a loss of the stock of an affordable home because the home is now sold at a market value. To counter that, what a land trust does is at the time of closing, when the house is being purchased, the individual arrives with whatever mortgage amount that they can afford, and the land trust arrives with a subsidy equal to the difference between that and the market value at that time of the home. But they take back ownership of the land that sits underneath that, and it goes permanently into a nonprofit organization, and it's held there in perpetuity. At the time that subsequently is leased to the person, so the person that's occupying owns the bricks and sticks, but they don't own the underlying ground underneath it. When the property is subsequently sold, there is a shared equity formula that comes in play. The person who has been occupying gets back their any money they placed or paid in terms of equity and on their mortgage. They get back any increases in terms of anything new they've added, any major improvements, and they get back part, but not all of the appreciation that goes into the value of their home if the market value goes up. The land trust gets back whatever it put into it as a subsidy initially in terms of the cost, and it also gets back the other part of that shared equity. Why that sharing of that? Because then that allows that home to be resold to somebody else, again, at a much lower price than it would have been had it been a market value home. It has worked in 300 other communities around the United States. It's one of the fastest growing methods of addressing housing problems in the nation going forward. We continued on with it. A piece of it that also may be of interest is that it's not simply a matter of showing up, handing a check and say hello, goodbye. There is an ongoing stewardship of the individuals who occupy those homes. The land trust is responsible for meeting with them at least annually, but more frequently if necessary, because many of the people who are occupying these homes have never had a home before. The stewardship involves, you need to mow your grass, you need to shovel your snow, you need to keep the cars off the front lawn, no parties until 4 o'clock in the morning. All of these sorts of things to help the individual become part of the community that they are going to go to fit into. I'll stop for just a second and say that there is also the land trust is flexible. It can be done in Fargo and in Moorhead, or it can be done in Holly or Felton or wherever it is. If there's some lots available, and the lots don't have to be large continuous blocks of them, they can be an infill block, a home, or something that's going to be torn down and something can be replaced in it. So it's a very, very flexible mechanism. We've created a 5-year plan, and that 5-year plan with Burlington North Associates has said we originally thought we could do 250 homes in 5 years, and that's impossible because it was going to cost us about $22 million to get that done. Recognizing that that's yesterday in federal government, but we're looking at, we said that if we could raise $5.8 million over a 5-year period of time, we could build 105 homes to go into it. At that period of time, the land trust would become self-sustaining, but for about $25,000 a year to pay for that stewardship individual. Here's something that's kind of interesting if you take a look at it. On a 30-year basis, first off, homes turn over roughly every 7 years on average in the United States. And if you never built another home after that first 5 years, over a 7-year period of time, those homes would turn over so that that 105 homes would wind up serving 450 families in our community. And the average cost, instead of being $45,000 as a subsidy, by the time you divide it out, costs something about $12,500 to provide that subsidy. There's some additional information on the back. I guess I go into it. We're working in phase 1 was to put this plan together. Phase 2 is to develop all of the documents necessary. In 2020, we anticipate being able to hire some staff. We have had one financial commitment. The City of Fargo has indicated that they will give us $50,000 next year. As I said, we're not asking for anything now because we don't know what it is we're going to ask for. We would want you to be aware of what we're doing, however, in case there's a question, ask what the heck is going on, and you can refer them over to us and we can explain it, and we're staying in touch with Steve so that you get that information. As it goes on, there's a stewardship sustainability model that's put on the back end of it there to kind of explain things, and the program can grow infinitely depending upon what it is you have for dollar amounts to put in for subsidy goes forward. Answer.
Wow, that's a good job.
Unload it, as you might expect. We've made a few of these presentations. Are there questions we can answer for you, please?
Questions for Tim?
A lot to take in.
What's that?
A lot to take in.
It is. It's something we spent a long time trying to figure out. There were 5 or 6 options offered by the consultants that did the workforce study, and we discounted each one of those and said, "This no, not going to work, not going to work." This one seems the most likely to work here. There's a national organization called Grounded Solutions that we're working with. It's a consortium of all the people who do land trusts, and get an awful lot of help for free from them, which is a good deal.
Yeah, it looks like it has a lot of potential, so it's like a good program.
Yeah, identifying, and this is one of the things we've talked about, how do we identify the properties? You know, the assumption is that, the great thing would be if you'd come to us and tell us that, you have 12 lots in someplace in the county that you could give us. We don't know if that's wherever, but maybe it will be at some point in time. We don't know.
Are you making these presentations to the rural cities in the county as well?
We've hit right now we've hit the top 6 government entities: Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Dilworth, Cass, and Clay County. And our intention is, I have met with Karen Lauer out in Barnesville, and my intention is to go west out into Cass County too, and to talk to those folks and let them know what the possibilities are too. Because it doesn't have to be, in some places, most of you are probably familiar with South A Street in Fargo. There's a block where the old Shotwell greenhouse used to be. There's a whole row of houses. Well, those are not affordable housing at $800,000 a piece. But that sort of a block might be possible. Or there might be some house that needs to be torn down someplace in the community, and it's right in the middle of nowhere. Might be a good place to have us go in, build a home on that property, and then have it be part of the land trust, and as I said, make that person or that family part of the neighborhood.
Right.
Frank, you had-
I probably missed it in your presentation, but where does the 5.8 million come from? Where does that come from?
Well, we're looking for a check, no. That's our goal right now. We're gonna have to go and raise that, and we're looking at a number of different entities. We're looking, state of Minnesota has some programs that we might be able to qualify for. We're looking at the possibility of doing some work in North Dakota. There's some other programs over there. There's a federal program. One of our people on our board, and it serves on this, as a friend who's with the Federal Home Loan Bank, and there's dollars elsewhere to do this. I was at a presentation in Barnesville about a week and a half ago, and the people from the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency have said specifically that they want to fund land trusts if they can figure out who in the heck is working with them. There's 11 of them in Minnesota right now already. And,
Okay, well, because at the beginning of your presentation, you said you weren't asking for any money, so.
not today from you.
Oh, okay, that's coming next week then, okay.
Yeah, next week will be,
Okay.
that's right, my suitcases.
I think it's important to note, Tim, though, that the FM Area Foundation was really instrumental in the Lakes and Prairies Community Action, getting their building south on Bellesley and being a active presence in that community, so thanks for the investment
Thank you.
to allow them to do that. I know, being on that board, it's very important to have Head Start classrooms in South Moorhead, and can see the benefit definitely of having that, so thank you for that.
Yeah, as I just finish up, that was actually kind of how we got into the land trust, because we said we were putting together our impact investing using some of our resources back into the community, and we didn't have an outlet for it. And the land trust seemed to be a pretty good outlet. We in essence have created our own borrower with this. Let me stop too again here. This is not an intention that this is going to be a program of the Fargo-Moorhead Area Foundation forever. Within the next 3 to 5 years, we want to be out of this. This is, as Maury Lanning on our board says, this is a spawn and spin. We're going to put this together. We want other people in the community to operate this, and we have ideas of how the board should be set up. But the original plan was we were going to loan money to the land trust for it to go out and build houses to do the construction loan portion of it. The part that we need to build on, however, is the 5.8 that you talked about to buy the real estate itself, the underlying real estate.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Appreciate your time, thank you. Okay, Kurt, request out-of-state travel.
Morning.
Another
Been a
trip
long
to-
morning for you.
Another trip to Hawaii.
Yeah, this one I have to work at though. Just a little background. So the request this morning is out-of-state travel to Fort Hood, Texas. Minnesota's the only state that sends veteran service officers to demob sites. And there's 650 soldiers coming. They drill around the Camp Ripley, Little Falls area. Might be Mr. Melton's crew, who knows. So we sit there, we see them one-on-one, do eligibility for the VA and handle their claims right there on site. So they get a jump on the VA portion and service connections for injuries. So the dates are 12 through 21, and that would include the 2 weekends there. So state pays the travel. I did send out earlier an email because they wanted to do the plane tickets, just the request. But they do the travel, they reimburse for the food in the hotel room, and then a rental car. I think we're getting one for 3 of us, but it's going to be hot in July, so I don't know if I want to venture out anywhere. So.
How many veteran service officers from Minnesota are going?
7, possibly 8. And there's kind of a list, but it's kind of like Russ Wilkin is the coordinator of this trip at Russ Foster out of Wilkin County, and he called and they had a couple canceled.
There's 650 Minnesota veterans
Yep.
coming back, right? Yeah.
Some could be attached and their home of record could be out of state, but we'll tackle them too. And the idea is if we can't, we'll direct them with information to their county veteran service office so they can see them once they get off orders.
If they're in the military yet, why would they apply for the veterans benefits while they're still in the military? I mean, you pretty much work with veterans that are out of the military.
And we have some that are still in, and you can. It's quite normal that you have 1 year after discharge to do your VA benefits, because while they're in, they're receiving.
Well, if they're injured or something like that in the VA or while in the service, wouldn't they apply while they're in service?
They could. We have a few that are service connected and still in. But there's a fine line with that because some of them don't want some service connection that might default them from a promotion or advancement, you know, for an idea, a mental health claim. Some of them don't want to do that service connection until they're totally out. It might withhold them from carrying a weapon on a deployment. That's just an example, but primarily we get a lot of folks that are within a year of retirement from actually, and around here at the active guard reserve, there's really no active duty site here. So, but they are taken care of if they're regular service before they get out and promote, but 99% are already out and we're trying to catch them service connections.
Well, that's what I figured you were.
Yeah,
You're pretty much working with people that are already out, but
Yep.
now you're saying you wanna,
yeah. And the advantage to get them before they come off orders, if they have an injury and there's not good documentation, they can go get that during their out processing center. Documentation to support their claim. So we're just, Minnesota jumps the gun, and I think it's a great thing because, you know, once you get off orders, you forget about everything. You don't go to the VA, and then their year expires. Within the year of discharge, it's easy. You just submit the claim. After the year, you have to prove a lot more. So I think it's a opportunity. I don't think Clay County has sent anybody in past years, so.
I think it's a great plan.
And to support, you know, us up here, it's usually the cities area and stuff, so.
I think it's a great plan. I think it's great that you're willing to do it. And
Yeah.
I support it. So what are the board's wishes?
Make
on
a
that
motion
question?
to approve the request.
Second.
One key note, just to highlight the Veteran Service Office. I was military appreciation at the Red Hawks. Hornbacher's donated $5,200 in grocery cards to me and Cass County, to Clay and Cass, so those will be
Nice.
given. We'll divide those up, and they're coming in $50 increments. So that'll help. We usually get our grocery cards from Beyond
Was
Mill River.
Hornbachers, you said they donated those?
Yes, sir.
And how much? $5,200?
$5,200.
That's excellent.
Yeah, we were on the field, they fed us, they gave us family tickets, it was a nice evening, a lot of veterans. Senator Eakin, one last thing, Senator Eakin will be presenting to a World War II vet that died, a prisoner of war. I was supposed to attend, but I'm going to Texas, so I called him on July 20th in the Holly area. So he will present the medals to the family. They have a big hoedown there or
Could you
something.
send that information to Steve so he can forward it to us?
I will.
Thank you.
I got the address and stuff, so just confirmed that yesterday. And that's it. I appreciate your support, and we'll do you proud at Fort Hood.
Sure you will.
Come back.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Have a good
Thanks,
day.
Kurt.
Well done.
Good work. Committee reports. Jenny.
Thank you. Last week I attended the highway tour arranged by our, I assume the commissioners on that highway tracking committee as well as the highway department. I thought it was quite beneficial to tour the projects that are coming up and get out into the rural parts of Clay County to see that. So thank you for arranging that. I attended Metro COG Executive Committee meeting to finalize the Executive Director review. I also attended the General Board meeting where we discussed the 2020 budget and UPWP amendment for a project on there. I think that's kind of a standing item on the agenda. We're just tweaking the 2020 projects. We signed the letter that Moorhead was requesting for support to Transportation Secretary. One big item that's been in the process for at least a year is they launched the Fargo-Moorhead MetroCog Bike Map app. So if you have Android or Apple, you can download the app to show you the different trails in the cities as well as Cass and Clay counties, and discussed the Castleton Comprehensive Transportation Comp Plan. I think it's pretty instrumental. I know that our planning and zoning department is discussing comp plan coming up, so if this could be of use, they can have it. Yesterday I attended the Lakeland Mental Health Executive Committee meeting. We discussed the CEO review that came out quite favorably. Donna Baker is doing an amazing job at Lakeland, and I continue to be impressed with the presence in Clay County. They are now in all the schools in Clay County. Barnesville just recently has added some extra hours in that, and the Baker Presbyterian Church gave a gift to support the programming there. It clearly is something that they feel is worthwhile, and that's good news there. Otherwise, the numbers in the first part of the year for margins have been down mainly due to vacancies and no-shows and different appointments. So we have a pretty good handle on the financial plan to get them out of the red, and it seems to be working because last month the numbers were in the positive. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Kevin?
On Wednesday, the 19th, we had a solid waste finance meeting, which we're looking at the future needs of solid waste and how it's worked. And I've been proposing for quite some time that we have two different revenue sources for solid waste. One is the service fee, which is put on everybody's property tax. And then there's also the tipping fee, which most people see, for example, in the city of Moorhead, see through their city assessment for the garbage. And that then comes back through the solid waste process and pays for the operations of the landfill. And I've been proposing to this point, and I know Commissioner Whalen has been along with me on that one, where we really need to be able to explain to our tax-paying public why we have one on the property tax and why we have another one that's billed individually. And so my proposal was that what we have that goes on the property tax statement should deal with any capital costs of solid waste. So for example, the local share that we may have to pay for the transfer station would come out of that. Any expansion to the landfill would come out of that. And as it turns out, after doing some studying, right now we're fairly close. So the $42, and that $42 has been, the property tax statement has been $42 for many, many years. And we're looking at, you know, if that were to propose go to $45, that $3 additional per year would cover our anticipated capital costs, including the local share of the regional landfill, or the new transfer station that we're dealing with. And also that would cover, included in there, I suggested that any admin charges, for example, for our people here, would also then fall under the capital portion. And then the tipping fee piece, the price per ton, so to speak, that we charge at the landfill, would be how we determine the tipping fee. And so all of the, and by the way, that capital one also includes establishing for the first time an internal service fund for the solid waste, which is good. It's something that we've found works very well with all our other departments. And so that number that's on the property tax, that $45 would cover the annual costs of those things, and we're looking at roughly $470,000 a year for its many different items, including the BOMAG dozers and all that, but it's putting money aside so that when it's time to pay. And then the operations, of course, would be the tipping fee, and you know, I think right now there would be, they'd be looking at the potential of maybe a short, or over a period of 3 years to adjust that tipping fee up to cover the operations. Not drastic by any means, but I think it's a very potentially good way to be able to explain to our taxpayers why we have a certain amount of property tax. And I know our administrator, Stephen, likes the idea. I think he's seen how when you put it on paper, it makes sense, and it's an easy way to explain to our taxpayers. So that proposal, we're working on that, and hopefully we'll come with a recommendation. We had to cancel our meeting for this week with solid waste, but we'll get to it. I did also, then on Thursday, I did attend the highway road tour, and I want to thank our highway staff and our planning people for joining us on that. It was good to actually visually see and feel the roads that we that we traveled on that need work. that morning before that, I attended the Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development meeting, and there were several items of discussion, and there was a lot of discussion regarding the fueling our future, and what's the other one, Commissioner Whalen? There's another one that's Prosperity.
Oh, the Valley Prosperity.
Valley Prosperity Partnership. And one of the things that I raised is that at that meeting was, we have all these different things, and why are they different, and if government agencies are asked to invest into each of these, what's different about them? Yeah, are they all,
Overlap.
Or are we overlapping in any way? And so I think Joe is going to be coming to our board pretty soon to help us better understand that. And then on Monday we had a long day. We had I had a diversion chairs executive meeting in the morning. In the afternoon, we had construction meetings for both the juveniles facility and the jail. And I do want to state that on the jail and the LEC, there was one change order that was proposed that, and I think I mentioned to you about these.
The Royal Flush?
The Royal Flush, the toilet issues. And so it was so much, I think they were going to provide the new gaskets or whatever they are at a cost basis, or I think they were going to eat some of that cost, but there was the total of it was estimated to be $11,000, and $8,000 of it was the labor to install these new parts. And I want to just give a hats off to Joe because he came up and said, no, we don't need to hire that done. Our staff can do that. So there's another example of where Joe is saving us $8,000 by just doing it in-house. So that's a big thank you to Joe. So, and I think Mr. Larson will talk to you a little bit about the 11th month walkthrough on the warranty thing. That's something that I did not attend, but Steve did, so I'll let him do that.
I got a question just on that $8,000.
Yep.
Why are we being charged for that? Wouldn't the company?
Well,
install them?
so my understanding is the cause of the malfunction in these, or the rusting or deterioration of them, was because of the type of water we get through the city. And that's something that they typically do not incorporate that.
It's chlorinated so
It's
much
chlorinated,
that it
yes.
hurts
So they don't incorporate that into a design, an architectural design and all that stuff. That's just, I mean, nobody gets that deep into, that
Should
part.
that be happening in every house in Moorhead then, or?
Well, you gotta remember that
I'm just trying to understand.
yeah, when you get into a facility, it's obviously become more of an issue with the jail than it has with the LEC, and that's really simply to understand because their usage is 24/7, 7 days a week. They're there. Even in our homes, most people aren't home to use. You're not flushing your toilets 24/7 and doing all these other things, but. So we nicknamed this thing the Royal Flush because this brand was going to be a Royal or something.
Well, I just look at the jail, I mean, sure, but there's a toilet in every one.
Yep.
But there's only a couple of toilets over there. They're used probably even more than these over here.
I don't think so. Yeah. Well, we argued that too, and again, you can have your construction engineer pointing finger at your architect and your architect pointing finger, and it's nobody's fault, so we pay for it. And maybe if Steve wants to say more about that, he can. But and then last night I made a wonderful trip to Barnesville, and I will reserve my comments on that for right now. That ends my report.
Frank?
Hey, Wednesday Historical Society, again, things are going good. This last weekend, they had the Scandinavian Festival put on by the Nordic Club there, but that place was full, so it was a very good turnout there. So things are still going good over the Historical Society, having a good year. I know that last year we had that St. John's Bible and stuff that really helped us out, but even though this year there's still been plenty of events and it's going a good year. Thursday, the city tour, or county tour, which we already talked about. I too appreciate what we've seen there. To look at some of the roads, actually, I've driven quite a few of the roads up in my district, but just getting down the south part of the district was interesting to see some of that too. Saturday, participated up at Hitterdal, their 135th anniversary. Monday, the Wild Rice Watershed Board and the Policy Committee there. We're just getting started there, getting things set up to approve the advisory committee and approving the participation plan and stuff like that. So it was just the initial sort of meeting and getting that going. Last night, again, the Buffalo Watershed Board, I was down there too for that thing, and you can see in the paper this morning they was not approved, did not approve the permit. One other thing I need to discuss, talk to some other commissioners from other counties, is the MNLARS that, I don't know if we need to discuss that or not, but we got a refund from MNLARS for about $107,000, so some of the other counties are designating those funds for certain things, and I don't know whether we have to designate that or not, or whether that has to be done.
In talking with Lori said her information showed that there's no strings attached to that, but I can look into that further.
Okay.
You know, and I was out there about closing time last week on one of the days, and our staff out there does a great job. I mean, they really do, especially with what they were handed with that service. But it seems to me that there are some areas that we could make that more efficient. And I don't know if it's, you know, you take a number and you wait, and I don't know if I saw 5 or 6 people that waited well over 45 minutes, got up the window and realized they didn't have the right forms. And so I'm not sure if that could be better signed, if you could check in with someone quick to make sure you have the correct forms. I'm not sure what the magic answer is, you know, but clearly there has to be some way to make that more efficient.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I know last week I think they did have 2 incidents in situations like that where our customers became excited. And I know that Mark Sloan is working with them. He's worked with them a great deal. They've had the signs. They moved to the televisions starting here this month. They're now going to have a recording that plays. You know, one of the things that we talked with Lori and Cheryl, you know, as far as a better change, you know, it would benefit to have almost somebody at the door, because it's been pretty evident that the signs and the TV and you know, and potentially now the recording, other than maybe drive the staff crazy from playing over it again, it hasn't been real effective in for some people in making sure that they have that. So
I mean, if you look at the wall, it is helpful for the different areas, but you know, the staff talked to me too about that piece, is that they're starting to see people that become increasingly agitated because they didn't know that they needed what's written on the letter or whatever. And
when I was out there, what I noticed was, I mean, I was only there about a half hour waiting for mine, but I noticed several times people come in there, I think they're dealers or whatever, car dealers, and, well, I'm just dropping this off, and they go up to the window and they don't take a number and spend 5-10 minutes there explaining what they're dropping off and or whatever. I mean, that happened twice during the half hour I was there, so. You know, I don't know whether we have to let everybody take a number or what, but, so.
yeah, the motor vehicle deals with two different types. They can drop off from the big dealerships. Otherwise, individuals can bring up to 5 titles at a time. Those people have to get in the line, but the challenge is it takes about 10 to 12 minutes per car. And so when they come in with five vehicles, that window's tied up for about an hour.
Well, I realize that, I mean, but even when they're just dropping stuff off, they're stepping ahead of somebody and taking up about 5 minutes to explaining what they're doing. I mean, that happens just, I don't know if it happens all the time. Just, very good. I think, right, I agree with Jenny though. I thought they did a great job, you know. When people came in with their stuff, they had it right,
It's quick.
It took me about, I don't know, 45 seconds and I was out of there, you know, it's just.
And I think one of the things that consistently we hear, we have citizens who are frustrated with the wait period, but our staff out there do a great job. In fact, we get lots of comments about how frustrated they are for waiting, but that when they get to those windows, the staff are so good in dealing with that, so it's a real positive for them.
That's my report.
Jim?
Thank you. On Tuesday, after our meeting, we had the Board of Adjustment. Is that valid to report that now? Yeah. And then on Thursday, went to the highway tour with the other commissioners. That was very interesting, and I'm glad we did that, and thanks to the highway staff for conducting that for us. And on Thursday, then, also later that day, I had the Lake Agassiz Regional Library Board of Trustees meeting, and we approved applications for fiscal year 2020 Regional Library Basic System Support and Legacy Arts and Cultural Heritage Programming. We also revised the Code of Conduct Policy and Distribution of Literature or Products and Proselytizing, and revised the Emergency and Non-Emergency Closing Policy to give local libraries more autonomy. That concludes my report. Oh, I'm sorry. Last night I was fortunate to attend the Buffalo River Watershed District meeting in Barnesville also.
You mean unfortunate.
That's what yeah.
Thank you. I had the construction meetings yesterday, and Kevin reported on that, and then I had Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC meeting last week, and one thing, they're having their annual meeting. I think it's indicated on our schedule here. It's Tuesday, July 23rd, and it's at the Fargo Air Museum. It starts at 3:30, and so we should probably, if we're gonna go, I'm gonna go, Clean, if you wanna let them know.
Isn't that usually
Oh.
during the day?
They're changing it.
Oh.
Yeah, they're doing a more informal type thing.
When is
We're gonna
that
have a
again?
present.
From 3:30 to
It's
6
at
on the
3:30
23rd.
on the 23rd of
Tuesday.
July.
Of July.
Of July, yeah. And they're doing they're set it up different this year. They're gonna have a presentation probably between 4 and 4:30, and then they'll have other things set up there, and so let Colleen know so she can let the EDC know who from our board is going to be attending. And let's see, what else today? Oh, I also went to the Buffalo Red Watershed District meeting last night, and I think everybody's aware that they denied the Diversion Authority's permit, for which they gave absolutely no reason for. They just denied it, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more issues to deal with that. So it's unfortunate. I've got a lot I'd like to say about it, but we'll save that for later.
I do want to add to that. I just got some information that obviously that vote came down, and several years ago, I talked about this whole process of the watershed expanding to include Otter Tail, and when that happened, there were two new board members, and I didn't oppose the fact of bringing Otter Tail in, but I strongly felt that one of those two new voting positions should be to Clay County, and Bowser gave one to Otter Tail, and they gave one to Wilkin. And my argument there was that any project that Clay County might want to do could be held hostage because we would have a minority of the 7-member votes. And it's exactly what happened last night, and the 3 votes against this represent a total tax capacity of the watershed of 19.6%. And they denied a permit to something that Clay County's been working hard on for 9 years to get.
Well, and roughly 75% of the funding for the Buffalo Red comes out of Moorhead and Clay County, and mostly Moorhead, and so it's in Otter Tail County, one of the counties that their representative voted against this, and I think they have 1% or less. It's frankly, it's outrageous. So, and hopefully Clay County citizens are paying attention to what's going on with this. So, anything else? Kevin, anything else?
I've said enough for right now.
I do have something. I do want to comment on the citizen to be heard. I fielded a phone call from him earlier last week with the same concerns, and I want to say that it's not this board's duty, or do we have the authority to revoke the elected official status of not only the sheriff or the county attorney, and he feels the way he feels, and that's fine, but I just want to make a comment that that's not within our duties.
Thanks.
Is that
Steve?
because both of them are elected officials?
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. 19th, attended central administrative meetings. As you're aware, with the additions of the law enforcement center and the correctional facility, we've been working with the budgets to have those buildings be more standalone in their expenses, and so we spent some time discussing that with Joe and Georgia. Tim Dent's group is continually being challenged with phishing scams that are being continually bombarding their program, and their staff are spending a great deal of time on that, and so they're looking at different ways to educate our staff. We spent a portion of the time talking about the DMV, which we've covered, and also the market study. Later that afternoon, we met with Sheriff Empting, City Manager Chris Volkers, Shannon Monroe, and Fire Chief Rich Dysons in regards to the dispatch center. Talked about the 2020 budget, their staffing plans, some of the concerns about ensuring that they're receiving excellent service, and also talked about some future expansion. I think the board is going to meet, this group is going to meet again and potentially reach out to the chair for his experience in developing that dispatch agreement. Again, later that afternoon, participated in the solid waste discussion that Commissioner Campbell has already addressed. On the 20th, I attended the road tours. Again, don't have anything new. Just want to thank Dave, Justin, and Terry for lining up that tour. On the 21st, met with Kathy McKay and Troy Amundson in discussing some of the needs and challenges that they're facing in their existing detox facility. Yesterday, I participated in new employee orientation. We welcomed 7 new employees to Clay County. I participated in the 11th month warranty walkthrough of the law enforcement center. It's under warranty yet until July 24th of next month. Really want to give a shout out to Steve Lanson. He's really been on top of this from day one. He's got spreadsheets on everything and when things were changed. So that warranty will extend past the dates on certain items that have been fixed. And so they do still have a number of items that are on the list. They're all aware of those. Most of which we worked through some of them yesterday. Some of them are still waiting for parts from different distributors. But again, yesterday was the main final walkthrough. But again, we have about a month if they have any additional issues that they can bring forward. So, in addition to Steve Lanson, we had Nick from Construction Engineers, and Scott Fettig was also part of that tour. Participated in the corrections owners meeting yesterday afternoon. Also the juvenile facility owners meeting. We did address, they've had a couple different code things that have popped up. They were hoping to have the phase 2 portion completed by July, first part of July, but it looks like mid-August is when we're going to push it back. We had everything lined up from the state inspectors, and so we had to reschedule, and their schedules didn't allow till mid to end of the August. Last evening, I also participated at the Buffalo Red board meeting, and just a quick note, Mike Clark from the auditor's office is going to be out of the office next week, and so your vouchers need to be in by Thursday of this week rather than Friday, and so at noon, so for prompt payment. So that concludes my report.
I did want to add at the juvenile meeting, I did ask, I know we have a regional meeting coming up in July, and so Construction Engineers is going to prepare a visual tour of where the project's at for our member counties to and that's going to be on July 19th. So they're going out of their way again to help prepare that. And I think right now they're at a point where they would just as soon do that as than to have a lot of people going in and out of there right now. They're really at a stage right now where things are really ramping up in there, so that's all I have.
Anything else? Anything from the county attorney's office?
I have nothing to add, thank you.
Colleen, anything else? We're adjourned.